Party City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
JJ knows this Dr. Kim. He's going to introduce him and go JJ. By the way, I want to pay tribute to JJ. He's been a great member. He's always so loyal to the club and he's always helping out in all sorts of ways.
Thank you. You're too kind. Morning. This is a good speaker coming up. Dr. Kim Johansson has a long and distinguished career in the field of emergency medical services. He graduated with a degree in public health from the University of California, Berkeley, a third-generation San Franciscan. He grew up and spent most of his working career in San Francisco. He served as chief of San Francisco Ambulance for 18 years, most notably during the 1989 earthquake. He is also an educator with a lifetime teaching credential at the college level in health sciences. During his career, he was responsible for the emergency medical care of 5 U.S. presidents, a healthcare advisor to the Chinese government. He helped coordinate the emergency medical services for Pope John Paul's visit to the Philippines in 1995, where the papal mass was attended by 4 million people. Then the largest single gathering of people in the history of the world, and in 2000 he began serving as Director of Health and Safety for the 20th World Scout Jamboree held in Sattahip, Thailand, a 3-year project. He has been in Thailand ever since. Today he will share his experiences and the challenges while working during the Loma Prieta earthquake in the San Francisco Bay Area.
I'm just waiting for the presentation. Great. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak here today, and Jim, a good friend of mine for almost 20 years, for introducing me. I'm going to talk about the 1989 earthquake in San Francisco, as you all have been told already. Okay, this is a seismic map of the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's a 9-county region. San Francisco is a peninsula that sits on the Pacific Ocean. This is San Francisco Bay, Marin County up north, San Mateo, Santa Cruz, and Alameda over here. The earthquake happened at exactly 5:04 p.m. It lasted 15 seconds. On the Richter scale, it was 6.9 to 7.1. It was a very clear day, 7 degrees Fahrenheit, so perfect weather, and sunset that day, which is important for the rescue operations as we go forward, was at 6:30 p.m. Game 3 of the Major League Baseball World Series was just about to begin between the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants. And it was happening at Candlestick Park in San Francisco, which is on the outer perimeter of the city limits. Just to give you a little bit of personal perspective about myself, what was happening just prior to the earthquake. I taught a class on emergency medical services at a local college, and the class was in the evenings at 6 p.m. So I would usually get to the class about an hour ahead of time, 5 p.m. The campus of this particular college sits up high on the hills above Oakland and had sweeping views of San Francisco. I had a trained dog with me, a Doberman named Sam, who was trained in search and rescue, and he sensed something was happening before the actual earthquake, because he jumped over 2 rows of seats and over me and out the front door of the car before the earthquake started. So animals do have a sense of these type of things happening. So I had a clear view of the San Francisco Bay Area from where I was. Within minutes, I could see plumes of smoke rising in San Francisco, in Oakland, and the surrounding areas. I was able to communicate with our command center via VHF radio, which basically works on a line of sight between 2 locations. So since I was high up and I direct to San Francisco, there was no interruption in my communications. I was informed that hundreds of calls were already coming in within minutes for medical assistance. So obviously my class was canceled. I had an emergency vehicle that I drove as part of my responsibilities, and so we had an ambulance center in the city of Oakland, which was about 15 minutes away from my location, and so I responded there to change into clothing that would people would recognize who I was versus just my regular civilian clothes, and to start the rescue operation planning. I'm going to show you a video in a second. Let's see if we can get that.
It was a wonderfully exuberant time, a golden Indian summer day.
It's about a
both
4-minute
local
video.
baseball teams were in the World Series.
At the tone, Pacific Daylight Time will be 5, 4, and 30 seconds.
So the Oakland A's take.
Hey, what, we're having an
Have you gotten word about the Bay Bridge?
What about the Bay Bridge? What's wrong with it?
The upper deck appears to have collapsed during that earthquake.
Hold on a second.
We are flying over the seismic structure right now. That section of highway that connects the Bay Bridge to 880.
I don't believe it. Man.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. Power has been interrupted temporarily in the park.
No power anywhere in the city, no phones, no word on how extensive the damage was.
We are in the Marina District of San Francisco. It looks like part of an entire city block is burning.
Please clear the area. We do not have enough medical personnel to be able to handle you if you get hurt here.
Shook like it was just a piece of straw. Everything's gone. Lamps went, and then it threw me off the chair.
I can only describe the situation here as nightmarish. The entire city, at least the part of the city that I have been in all day, is completely blacked out. There are no traffic lights. Civilians, if you were, are trying to direct traffic. People are wandering the streets aimlessly. It is a horrible, sickening feeling to be in the city. I could only advise people to not come here under any circumstances.
There was so much damage in San Francisco and Oakland that the area near the epicenter, the Santa Cruz Mountains, almost was forgotten. People in Hollister, Watsonville, and Santa Cruz felt left to fend for themselves. So many people felt helpless that night, no way of knowing where their loved ones were, whether their loved ones were even alive. Desperate messages scrawled on sheets of paper, the new homeless sleeping under the stars. For some, it took years to recover. For many, the emotional scars still remain.
So the San Francisco population had 4 major areas that were affected by the earthquake. There were 22 major fires in San Francisco, 1,400 collapsed buildings, complete power blackout, and no water pressure in the fire hydrants. The Bay Bridge, which was the second site of catastrophe, the upper deck collapsed into the lower deck, as you saw in the video, and there were cars trapped underneath the damage. The Cypress Freeway was the third site, and the upper deck collapsed onto the lower deck, so it was a two-level freeway. It was only one of three, I think, in the state of California. And for 1.5 mile section, it completely collapsed except for one section, which is a miracle, and I'll show you in a second. The structure was very unstable and made it very difficult for rescue operations to take effect. The fourth section was Santa Cruz County, and Santa Cruz County, you see, sits down here. San Francisco up here, Peninsula, and then the various counties. The Bay Bridge is going between these areas right here. And so basically San Francisco was cut off because all the bridges were immediately closed for structural inspection, and that took at least one day. So it was very difficult to shift resources from any areas outside of San Francisco. San Francisco had a total area that was built on landfill from the great earthquake in 1906. So if you see this red area here, this is all landfill. It doesn't sit on granite or bedrock. It sits on reclaimed water. So this section of the city, this all came from the 1906 earthquake. Here on the map, it's just this little portion right here. This is the Golden Gate Bridge, and then this is the Bay Bridge with an island in the middle called Treasure Island. This was a 4-story building that caught on fire due to a gas rupture leak. Okay, so in San Francisco, with a population of 900,000, there were 22 major fires happening at the same time. There are 49 fire stations in San Francisco, so basically every fire station was involved with putting out fires. The majority of the fires were in the Marina District, where this landfill was. There was no water or electric to 1 to 4 days. Now, how do you think that they put out the fires? Well, one of the reasons San Francisco learned from the earthquake of 1906, and they built what's called cisterns underneath the ground. So every 5 or 6 blocks, square blocks in San Francisco has an underground water tank the size of, a city block. And those were filled with water. And so what they have to do is they come in and jackhammer a hole in the pavement, and then they the fire trucks put their suction hose into it and draw water out. Also, because the Marina District, as you saw, was landfill, it was very close to the bay, they could put their fire hoses into the bay and drain out salt water to use fighting the fires. So, and they also had fireboats in San Francisco, which were pretty strong and could reach some of the houses right along the shoreline. Some interesting facts just about the whole process. In San Francisco, in the Marina District, where most of the fires were occurring, it's a very popular nightlife area and has some of the best restaurants in San Francisco. And they served free food to all the rescue workers for the 4 days that they were there. So everybody got to eat prime rib, nice meals, steaks, and pasta, because all the food was going to go bad anyway, because they had no refrigeration, electricity, and they were basically cooking, with the gas stoves and portable stoves and stuff like that. So they wanted to get rid of their inventory also. All the major TV networks were broadcasting live within 2 hours from all of the 4 areas that you saw. During the first hour from 5:04 p.m. till 6 o'clock at night, the most number of calls ever recorded in the AT&T telephone system into a specific area code occurred. So 415 was the area code of San Francisco, and there were more calls that 1 hour, people trying to call their relatives and friends, than any other time in history. Just a couple of pictures. On the left there, on my left, is a 4-story apartment building that collapsed down to the ground. And here's a side view of that same apartment building. That car is parked on the street, so you can see how far over. Our sidewalks are probably about 10 to 12 feet wide in San Francisco, so you can see how far over that building shifted during the earthquake. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through each of the rescue sites that occurred. The first one was the Oakland Bay Bridge. Now, we did not initially know the bridge had collapsed till about 10 minutes after. And there was only 1 death on the bridge, and I don't know if you remember, you saw that red car that was down into the pit, sort of. That person tried an Evel Knievel jump and sped up and tried to jump over this span here. Unfortunately, he did not make it. Okay, the upper deck goes into San Francisco from this direction. The lower deck goes to Oakland. Okay, so the person was here, and the car just didn't quite make it. Just another shot perspective of the bridge. It was closed for almost 1 month after. There's 9 bridges in San Francisco Bay Area. All 9 bridges were closed for 24 hours for inspection. Once again, the Bay Bridge was closed for a month before it was reopened. The second site of the rescue operation was the Oakland Cypress Freeway. It's a 1.5-mile double-deck freeway. The top deck collapsed onto the bottom deck. Structure was very unstable and dangerous for rescue. There were 42 people that were crushed to death in their cars. There were 2 extremely heroic rescues. One was a 6-year-old boy whose leg had to be amputated in the car to get him out, and the other was a 57-year-old male rescued after 89 hours. CNN had a satellite truck broadcasting live footage before heavy rescue arrived on the scene. So it just goes to show you how they have units stationed everywhere, more so than almost rescue. Okay, this is a miracle shot. This is a Chevron truck carrying about 40,000 canisters of motor oil, traveling on the freeway at about 60 miles an hour. During the earthquake, the freeway was collapsing behind him as he was trying to brake. And luckily, for an act of God, a miracle, the truck, this one section out of 1.5 miles did not collapse where the oil truck was located. And if the oil had been crushed and caught on fire, it would have made that whole section of the freeway an inferno. So this was good advertising for Chevron, I guess, as far as their driving skills. So the initial ambulance response headed for the Bay Bridge was coming from our office in Oakland. It would have to go underneath the Cypress Freeway to get onto the Bay Bridge. That's when the Cypress Freeway was identified that it had collapsed and now was another major rescue location. We had great luck. Our ambulance staffing was at peak at that time of day. It was also a shift change, so there was double staffing available. There were 40 maintenance workers from the freeway division just getting out of a training class. And normal commute hours, both levels of that freeway would have been very crowded with cars, almost bumper-to-bumper traffic. But because of the World Series, everybody left work early to go home or to a bar or whatever to watch the World Series that was just about to begin. So there were very few cars on this section of the freeway when the earthquake actually occurred. So here's a couple more pictures of the freeway. There was no electric power in any part of the city in Oakland. There were numerous gas leaks. You could smell the gas coming out from all the broken gas mains in the geographical area around the freeway. There were ruptured water lines. So once again, no pressure for the fire department to use except for the tanks on their trucks or what they could siphon from someone else. Emergency radio communication was working, so we were able to communicate with our personnel and send resources where they were most needed, but we had a triage. Because there were so many calls coming in, we could not respond to every single call that was requesting emergency service. So we had to prioritize. Basically, people in homes saying someone's having a heart attack, someone was cut with broken glass and bleeding. Those people had to fend for themselves and get to the hospital on their own, because all the rescue personnel were dealing with the freeway, the bridge, the marina district, and the resources were then totally utilized for those areas. Cellular telephone was okay, but it was totally overloaded. Everybody trying to call their loved ones to find out if they were all right. So this actually caused problems with the emergency personnel because they could not use their cell phones. We'd have to keep trying and trying and trying to get a connection. One of the changes that they made after the earthquake is that the cellular telephones assigned to emergency services have a priority code in front of their ident number, their identification number. So during a natural disaster, the phone company can switch off all the public cellular phones and leave on the emergency services, so the emergency services have access to that line of communication. Buses were used from the freeway. There actually were hundreds of people injured at the freeway, in it and around it. So we used buses, school buses, to transport people to the hospital. Helicopters were totally not useful. A highway patrol helicopter tried to come in and land near the area and just blew concrete dust and rubble like shrapnel everywhere. And so they were waved off and advised, and all the media helicopters which tried to come in, they put up an airspace quarantine area because it was so dangerous from the downdraft from the helicopters shooting all this debris everywhere. It was injuring the rescue personnel and people on the ground. We did have search dogs on the scene almost immediately. Just a personal note, my dog Sam received the highest award for heroism from the state of California for his search and rescue efforts on the freeway. Now you can see here, this is a concrete pillar that's about 4 feet wide, and the upper section is about 10 feet high, and this one's about 12 feet high, and this is all steel rebar here. That was just totally like mush. It was like paper during the earthquake. And so you can see the level of destruction that occurred on the freeway. It was just incredible. Now, some of the things that we did, we used forklifts. This is an industrial area that the freeway runs around. And we used forklifts. So we took like a pallet of wood, and the rescue personnel would get on the pallet of wood, and then the forklift would lift them up to the second level of the freeway to get them on to the freeway. And so these were people just coming from their warehouses wanting to help, and so they came out with all these forklifts. And so we had about 10 forklifts that were taking people up and down along the 1.5 miles of the freeway. Okay, so heroic rescue number one. This is a little grisly, I'm sorry. The mother was killed. This is an actual picture of the car that we're talking about. So the steel and concrete beam that goes across from left to right to hold up the section of the freeway collapsed down. So the roof of here is actually the freeway roof. This is the length of the pillar that supports it, and then this is the pavement. So the pillar came down and crushed the car, but held the roof of the upper freeway still up above it. The mother was killed by the concrete beam. She was driving the car, obviously. You can see that no chance for survival. The 8-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son were in the back seat. The 6-year-old was in a car seat. The 8-year-old was seat belted in. The 8-year-old daughter was unconscious, but they were able to cut the side of the car open with the jaws of life and get the 8-year-old daughter out and on the way to the hospital fairly quickly. The 6-year-old legs were trapped under the front seat of the mother. The car seat became detached and slid up under the front seat of the mother. The pillar then came down. So the pillar's on top of the mother, pushing the seat down with the boy's legs underneath the car seat. There's no way that this level of concrete could be lifted up by any jacking mechanism. It was just too many tons of weight. So the mother had to be cut in half with a chainsaw and her upper torso body removed and to get access so that they could then cut the back of the seat off. So then now they had a space to rescue the boy. And then a surgeon, paramedic, and emergency medical technician went in and amputated the boy's leg that was keeping him trapped inside the car, and then he was taken to the hospital. That whole process to rescue the boy took 4 hours. And this is dark now. Remember, they only had emergency lighting, and there's still an unstable freeway with aftershocks occurring, and the people working in this car with an aftershock and the freeway shaking. You can imagine how terrifying that would be. Okay, Rescue 2 was a man named Buck Helms. He was 57 years old. This is a picture of the car that he was in. He was found after 89 hours. They started drilling into the freeway and putting sound sensors into the freeway at like every 5 yards for 1.5 miles. And they found that he was still alive. And this is a miracle because in a few more hours, 7 more hours, all rescue efforts on the freeway were to be discontinued because of thinking there was no chance for survival. When they found him, it took 6 hours to get him out of the car, but unfortunately he died 28 days later in the hospital of kidney failure. So the earthquake damages, what did it cause? There were 67 deaths, 3,757 known injuries that required hospitalization. Homes that were damaged or destroyed were a little over 18,000, 12,000 people homeless, 2,500 plus businesses damaged where it would take months for them to recover. And the economic costs were $6.5 billion, which at that point in time was the most expensive natural disaster in U.S. history. Everything could have been much worse, including the death count and the injuries, except for the fact that San Francisco had very, very strict building standards, and earthquake preparedness. And so the buildings that in any other city in the world would have collapsed did not, because of earthquake construction standards. And because of having the cisterns of water spread throughout the city, the fire department had resources to fight the fires when there was no water available in the fire hydrant system. These are some of the lessons we learned from the earthquake. Paper planning really doesn't work. Most of the manuals for disasters were under rubble in various places. The Public Health Command Center, the Department of Public Health Command Center was under rubble, and so they were completely knocked out of being able to assist. The command structure was very good. The people working in the various agencies, police, fire, and medical, all knew their responsibilities and worked together well, but obviously you can learn and improve on that. Also, everybody wanted to be a hero. Now, I gave the example of the Cypress Freeway with the people in the warehouses bringing out their forklifts to help, and that was great, but then also untrained people wanted to get up on top of the freeway and start helping however they could, and that was bad because they didn't have the proper equipment on: hard hats, steel toe shoes, protective vests, eye goggles, and helmets, and they would be easily injured and then put a strain more on the resources of the medical people there. So we had to keep most of the civilians at bay, away from the different rescue operations that were going on, because it was just too dangerous. We also learned that you needed at least 2 backup systems for everything that you had to use on an essential basis. Because San Francisco was basically cut off due to the bridges and so forth being closed, they had to operate on their own, so we learned that you had to have resources for at least 4 days to continue rescue operations before you could really count on outside help. The telephone system worked. Now, this is something that we learned. The landline system stayed active and operational, but we all know you pick up the telephone, and in the old days you picked up a telephone and you heard dial tone, and when you heard dial tone you knew you could dial a number and call out. Well, what happens is during the earthquake there were so many calls tying up the circuits, when you picked up the phone you heard nothing and you thought that the line was dead because of the earthquake. That was not the case. The phone system was searching for a number, an open line, so it's searching through 415 area code, it can't find one. Now it goes to the next area code and tries to find an active number, and it goes and keeps on searching. So if you stayed on the telephone for a minute or 2, you would eventually get a dial tone and be able to make your call. So this is one of the things that we learned from the earthquake. As I said, the cellular system was overloaded. Hence, we've corrected that by giving priority phones to the emergency services workers so that the public system can be shut off, which has some downside to it because then they can't call for help either. But priorities have to be made as far as getting the resources to where they are needed in the most efficient manner. After this, there was a lot of critical incident stress debriefing, such as post-traumatic stress incidents. Certainly the people that had to cut the mother in half, which was one team, and the second team that had to deal with amputating the boy's leg in the car and getting him out, had indelible images printed in their minds forever, and would need counseling and support services for quite some time. We did capitalize on the working bonds created. When you're doing a rescue and someone is next to you helping you in a life and death situation, that person becomes your friend for life, and you know you can count on them. So those were very positive outcomes of the earthquake. With that, I thank you very much for listening to me today, and I hope this has been somewhat informative and interesting for you. Ren, I understand there's a question and answer if people want to ask.
Yes. I have a microphone
Gentleman over here on the wall on the left.
Thank you, Doctor. I was living in Monterey, and a good friend of mine was living on Lombard Street in San Francisco, renting, and their building had minor damage, but the entire building, all the tenants moved out, but within 60 days, all the tenants, new tenants moved in. So I guess that says something about the rental situation in San Francisco.
Yeah, rental situation in San Francisco is always very tight because it's a very condensed area, 49 square miles with a population of now over 1 million. And so at that time, 900,000. So yes, rental properties were at a premium. Also because so many apartment buildings in that entire district were damaged, that took a lot of out of stock for availability.
Okay. Got a second microphone there that will help.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, brought back memories. I was a paramedic when we had the bombings in Birmingham, and we were very lucky, the same as what you were. We had a union meeting, so we were double staffed, plus many people had come into the stations, and we were able to respond quite quickly. But the big problem was we hadn't got the phones that you have now, cellular phones, that just weren't around at the time. And that was quite traumatic because we had people that wanted to help, and they were loading injured people, which really was bad for the injured person, into taxis. And the unfortunate thing, they overloaded the main casualty hospital. So it tied up a lot of ambulance crews transferring those people to outer hospitals and taking severely injured into the main casualty hospital. And that was all rectified eventually. But we had 22 people dead there, and the big injuries were in the tavern in the town, which is an underground pub. And I remember a bloke, as I was approaching, trying to run down the road with only one leg. I couldn't believe it. He kept standing up and falling over. And so that was quite traumatic. And I appreciate the emergency vehicles and the people that went through that trauma. Certainly bigger than what I suffered. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. Just to expand on that a little bit, we had a very good system of triage at all the different areas, and the buses were loaded with only non-life-threatening injuries. So we call them walking wounded. And so they were put on buses, and then the walking wounded on these buses were taken to hospitals on the outer areas of the earthquake area. So the hospitals closest to each of the rescue sites only got emergency cases, and they were sorted accordingly. So we never overloaded any hospital with too many patients. Yes.
With regards to the cisterns, why would they be designed in such a way as you had to jackhammer through the concrete to get to them? Why wouldn't you just park a fire hydrant on top so you could just pump the water out in an emergency?
Old school. They were designed after the 1906 earthquake, and so they were built in the 1900s. And remember, they're under the roadways, and so they had to be thick enough and to support trucks, buses, cars over a long period of time. And you could see the cisterns, they were designed to be easy jackhammered because they had a ring of bricks that went around the circle that showed you where you would jackhammer in, and that was the way to get access to the cistern. But to answer your specific question, I don't know, other than just it was designed in the 1900s and never changed after that. Yes, sir.
Absolutely brilliant presentation. Thank you very
much. Thank you.
You did say that all the electricity, etc., was all out, but then the CNN were able to broadcast all over the world and everything. So where did they get the electricity from?
Their trucks, they have generators.
Oh, do they? Yeah. So did they, was that information be able to direct it to you to help with your direct, you know?
No, they were in the way. We had to have the police move them away. They wanted, you know, the shot of the, you know, the gruesome body, you know, trapped underneath the car with their arms and heads, you know, hanging out. I mean, this is what live TV, you know, wants, sensationalism. And so the police were very good at keeping them out of the scenes. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, thank you for your information. I would like to know, is the boy with a lost legs, is he still alive?
I don't know if he's alive today. I do know during my career, which lasted another 10 years after that, that the boy was alive then. Yes, yes, sir.
California is known for earthquakes. As a power plant operator at the geysers, every day there are earthquakes, period. What we did is we lost a 500 kV line, so a lot of California was without power. 230 lines, all the 21 kV lines that feed your homes and stuff. So that's why there was really no power.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, sir, over here.
Hi, a couple of questions. Are the cisterns still in use now? And number two, about the highway, the double-decker highway, what happened to that highway afterwards? Was it replaced, or did they decide that probably wasn't a good design for the earthquake region?
I was in San Francisco last year, and I drove over a cistern, and whenever I do that, it always brings back memories. So yes, they're still there. In regards to your second question, the freeway system was a poor design double deck, and so the state of California did away with all double deck freeways over the next 5-6 year period. The San Francisco Bay Bridge was changed from a double deck structure to a single deck structure. That took almost 10 years to complete. But now, to best of my knowledge, there are no double deck freeways or bridges in California. Yes, sir.
Thank you. What was Sam's most dramatic or memorable incident?
Trampling me getting out of the car. Sam was a Doberman. He was extremely well trained. And if I told Sam to sit and stay while I did something, he would never move from that location, and nobody could give him a command other than me to do anything. He searched the freeway and went down into spaces that were not accessible by humans, and he never actually found anybody that was trapped in a car, but we only had those 2 cases that I examined. All the rest of the people were pretty well evident, but just his working in and out, in and out, in and out over a 6 to 8 hour period with me, that is very memorable.
Over here.
Just for your information, nothing happened to the stadium. The stadium did not fall apart in any way, so the people did not panic. They just calmly walked out and went to their cars. And then, because it was the World Series, they had, on the light towers, they had windsocks, colorful windsocks. Well, one of those windsocks wrapped around the lights, so they had to get a volunteer to go up there and unwrap it. And while that guy was up there, he got the ride of his life.
So the windsock happened just before the earthquake.
Correct.
Right. They just played the national anthem right at 5 o'clock because 5 o'clock was the broadcast time on the TV. So they played the national anthem. The team that's taking the field is running out, and the first batter is going up to the plate, and the earthquake happens. We had 4 ambulances at Candlestick Park that were there in case anybody got injured during the normal World Series game. That was just standard operating procedure. And so those 4 ambulances were also additional resources that we normally would not have had on that day, and they were able to be put in service quite quickly when it was realized that the game was canceled, nothing was happening at Candlestick Park, and there weren't going to be any injuries there, and so the ambulances were sent to the Marina District. Thank you, Bill, for sharing that. Yes, sir.
So, a gentleman was asking about the power for the remote trucks or OB trucks for CNN and things like that. Most broadcasters, as part of their license, are also required to be able to respond in the case of a local or national emergency, and usually they have double or triple redundant power systems within their facility, as well as having things like most cable operators around here again also have redundant systems to be able to get out information in case of national emergencies. ABS-CBN in the Philippines, we did a system for them, triple redundant, because they have both a worry about terrorism as well as cyclones and earthquakes as well. So they've got redundancy in different parts of the building as well as different systems, storage for power for diesel and all that sort of stuff. And just like you were saying about the telephone networks, that was something that came in London after the bombings were becoming frequent there, so the BBC phones were on a separate mobile network.
Yes, just a informational fact. All of the ambulances in our fleet had emergency power that is powered by the engine and a converter. So all of our ambulances had electrical power that could supply ventilators, tools that needed to be done, and so forth. So each ambulance actually was a mobile station. And after the initial rescue on, I think by the end of the second day, we just parked our ambulances in strategic locations around the city, and they acted as like mini healthcare centers, and people with minor injuries could just go up to an ambulance and get treated for their cuts and bruises and be evaluated if they needed to go to a hospital. Yes, in the back.
Hi, I found your presentation extremely interesting. Having experienced an earthquake myself in Tokyo, I fell out of bed 2 o'clock in the morning, and I tell you one thing, you're absolutely paralyzed. I just didn't know what to do. It was terrible. But anyway, to come back to your presentation, having been in San Francisco quite a few times, traveling across the Bay Bridge always put knots in my stomach because I always thought of an earthquake. But that bridge was built, I believe, in the 30s. And it is still standing. It's amazing how many earthquakes it survived. It must be fantastic engineering, I think.
Yes, indeed. I've gone over that bridge thousands of times because we had offices on both sides of the bridge. And so I share some of your anxiety when traveling. The bridge in the middle has a Treasure Island, which was an old naval base. And so there's a land spot where the two areas of the bridge connect right in the middle of the bay. Just some background information.
Just to add to that, during the course of my working for the ambulance service. 25 years later, people from the bombings were still having wood and plastic actually dug out at the hospital. So there's a lot of trauma goes on after that people don't hear about. And the same with your emergency workers. I can understand them having this impression in their brain for the rest of their lives. We were never given that. America was different. Okay.
Yes, one of the benefits were basically our ambulance crews got free meals while they were on duty for, you know, the next 6 months. Anytime they went into a restaurant in uniform when they were on their meal break, very few restaurants would ever charge them for the meal. So they ate a lot and gained a few pounds, I guess.
Okay, I'm an ex-RAF medic, so I had my fill of road crashes and aircraft crashes. I never experienced an earthquake until I came to Thailand. And I was on the 24th floor of a building in Soi 24 in Bangkok when it had one of its tremors. And when the room shakes and sways, believe you me, that is scary.
Yes, indeed. Just a footnote, we'll end the question and answer period with this, is that the earthquake indirectly brought me to Thailand. After the earthquake, because of my position in San Francisco, I had my 5 minutes of notoriety or fame, and I was requested by other cities around the world to come and speak on this topic, places like Tokyo and the Philippines and so forth, and Russia. And so that's how Thailand, I guess, saw my name at one point in time and invited me to come and assist with the World Jamboree Scout Project here. So you can thank the earthquake for me standing here today. Thank you very much.
Well, I would like to say that was more gripping. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere, Dr. Kim. We're not done with you yet. I thought that was more gripping and fascinating than most Netflix miniseries. I thought it should be a Netflix miniseries, actually. So we do have a small token of our appreciation. There was only, I have to say, one part of the presentation I didn't like. No, we thank you, don't thank us, because that was exceptional. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is yours. Just one more thing. Can we get you to come back and give a talk about emergency services for the US presidents? I think that might be classified, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
It'll be a pretty interesting talk, I can tell you. Thank you. And thank you, JJ, for booking him in. It was